This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
I was trying to get it how I live. I want them dead presidents. I want to pull up, head spin, get it, get fly. I got 6 jobs, I don't get tired. I don't get tired. I don't get tired. Get it, get fly. I got 6 jobs.
And we are still not tired on this week's episode of Two Bad Hombres. I am your host, Vito Geronimo Churko, alongside my usual sidekick and broadcast partner in fun. That is Doc from Doc and Jock, John Charles Macaroon. John, how are you doing?
Vito, welcome to the weekend. Want to thank the fine sponsor of this episode, the Legacy Football Organization, for allowing us to broadcast every single week. Man, lots to get to this week. I'm excited. Lots of things happening in the world of social media. Lots of interesting things happening in the world of Detroit sports. So I'm ready to kick it off. How have things been with you?
Going well. I mean, it's been a good week now. It was freezing cold, icy conditions on the road. I mean, I had to drive back on Tuesday night of this past week from the Free Press late at night with the icy conditions already present on the road, on the freeway, and all over the place, on Groesbeck and Gratiot and everywhere. Everywhere, man. And it was brutal the following morning, too, on Wednesday morning, too. And all these schools were closed down subsequently as well. I mean, my alma mater, De La Salle, all these different high schools that I had to call up the high school football coaches of from these schools, too, and they had the day off because of the icy weather, and I called them up for the Detroit Sports Commission and for the Prep Kickoff Classic. The Detroit Sports Commission, another fine sponsor of the DSP network, doing work for them on a freelance basis, and they've got this Prep Kickoff Classic and matchups to announce to kick off the Kickoff Classic per se, and way ahead of time, as you know, the Prep Kickoff Classic isn't until late August, but a lot of great matchups too on the horizon that will be released to the public very, very soon. And guess who already knows about all those matchups? Well, nobody else does. Vito, Jerome Turco here, yours truly. So I do some tasty matchups as well to indulge in the summer, late in the summer, to kick off the high school football season in the state of Michigan, Doc.
Now, I'm very proud of you. You were featured in Nolan Bianchi's Sports Media Now podcast. It was very entertaining for me to listen to. I got a chance not only to get more insight regarding, you know, your perception of the project, but also the work that you're doing now in public relations with the other entities as well. And good job. So for those that haven't heard it yet, go definitely check it out. Follow Vito on Twitter at Vito Jerome. You spent an hour with Nolan and he kind of interviewed you. What was it like being featured? Because I've been featured a couple times, but it's been a couple years, and so I haven't been formally interviewed in regards to the podcast. I think in general people do intro me a little bit with some questions about the podcast and what I've done and things like that, but I do find it fascinating that some people are still releasing new podcasts, you know what I mean? They're starting new projects, and those that report on it will say, this whole podcast medium is still new. Well, it's not. It's not a new medium.
No, it's not that new at this point, right?
Adam Carolla this year is celebrating a decade of podcasting. Okay, so it's been around, but I think the fun part is that we got in really early before it was popular, and we did it so regularly that some podcasts that are coming out are similar to the ones that we've done. And I'm very impressed with where people are taking it. I'm so impressed with everybody that's now understanding the medium and what it's about. It's a deeper dive into conversations. We're allowed to have like 30-minute segments. We can talk about whatever we want, and hearing your passion about it. I just loved hearing the fact that and recalling that how you got here was just you messaging me saying, I want to do it. And I was like, okay. I think that, you know, based on meeting you, I felt like, you know what, this guy has more than an 80% chance of doing it every single week without flaking. Because in the end, I'll share, you know, other people message me and say, hey, I want to do a podcast. And I'm like, you know, here's a tip, okay? The first thing I say to people is, okay, send me a 5-minute demo, okay? Now, the odds of me being intrigued by you go up if you can get it to me that day, okay? Because that means you're serious. Now, if you take time and it takes, you know, for me, putting together 5 minutes, I don't think is that difficult, because if you're passionate, you should have takes for days. And for me, now, obviously back then, I didn't have it. But now, if you ask me my opinion on something, I'll ramble on for 5 minutes about anything. And I've loved the growth that I've been able to have through this medium. And so if you're interested in jumping aboard a network, or to network, like you said, with somebody, you got to show that you're interested. So don't wait 48 to 72 hours, because you might get 15 other people that would have messaged. So if you're interested in something, it shows if you're passionate. trust me, it really does show, and it comes across through the work that people do and things like that. So what was it like for you? Did you like being interviewed? Do you like kind of talking about the stuff that you're doing and kind of probing a little bit, because you were kind of giving some advice to people that might jump into this?
Well, I was talking about you a lot, too, and showering you with love. I had to do that, so that felt good for me. I know it felt good for you and Adam as well from Doc and Jock. You guys are co-founders, co-owners of the podcast network, so I had to take the opportunity to bow down to you, and rightfully so, paid you guys some respects. Not that you have passed away, that I needed to, but you deserved it, and I did shower you with some praise, and I enjoyed the interview that we've talked about already, by the way, in the past here on the DSP Network airwaves. But, I mean, it's an opportunity to shower Nolan Bianchi with some more love as well for this opportunity that he started for himself by taking the initiative, doing a podcast himself with, you know, the one-on-one nature of it, because it's a little bit nerve-wracking at first, too, when you're starting this up and you're interviewing people that you haven't really met or don't really know that well, and you're sitting down with them in person one-on-one. That can be tough for a young guy. For a young guy like me, I'm older than Nolan Bianchi, but it still can be rather tough. You get some nerves, and you just can't let them overcome you. And I think it goes back to, you brought up how I messaged you. It goes back to taking the initiative at all times. And that's what I did at a very young age. Still very, very young, by the way. Not like you, Doc. But I took advantage of that, and you allow me to, well, enter the airwaves here and grace you with my presence on a weekly basis. And actually, twice a week, actually, too.
Yeah, the best part of it is that you've seen us grow from where we were when you first walked in with your brother. And
with Brett, too.
Exactly.
Yes.
And now you see where we're at, where, you know, you walk in and people are like, oh, they rib you a little bit. And I think people recognize, okay, you're part of the Detroit Sports Podcast Network and other entities as well. But I think hopefully more so that you're affiliated with us, and I think that's great. And I think it provides you a lot of opportunities to do and branch out, and I think at least giving you that platform to jump off of this and take advantage of it has been awesome to see the things that you've done. And like I said, the work that you were able to do from Callahan was awesome, and I had a good time with it. And, you know, jumping into the podcast, it's interesting to see because some people try things on a huge scale and they eventually maybe do some things that they're not supposed to do. And the good thing is you've been upfront and honest. You do the hard work, and everything has been really fun. But Billy McFarland is a cat that does not believe in that ethic.
No, not at all. What a con man, huh?
I had texted you because, and here's how it exactly went down, okay? I was sleeping. I was just, for some reason, sometimes or another, you know, whether it be maybe the practice or the podcast or other ventures that I'm doing, you just wake up because you have a thought. Well, obviously the first thing you do is you wake up, you get up, and then you start scrolling Twitter a little bit to go back to sleep. So I scrolled Twitter, and all of a sudden I came across a tweet that said, this Fyre Festival documentary on Netflix is off the chains. And I had seen a preview for it. I had seen a commercial on Netflix for it. So I'm like, let me start it, and then I'll fall back asleep. But once I got into it, the Fyre Festival documentary on Netflix, I watched that at 3 o'clock in the morning.
3 a.m., really?
Yes.
Woke up for that, huh?
I woke up, and I just started watching it. Then I was like, you know what? I'm so intrigued by this. I saw the reviews and things like that, and there were people on Twitter that said, there's another one on Hulu. So I jumped right in at 4:30 after and watched the Hulu one. Now, they're both really good, but the Hulu one is a little bit more distinguished because they actually have Billy talking on it. But they're both the same. They both should be combined into one 3-hour documentary that gives you insight into it. But holy cow, it really is a collection of where we're at as a society through the power of social media. For those that don't know, okay, the Fyre Festival was set up last year, and what had happened was in 2017, there was this company that was started called the Fyre app. And they wanted to actually, the people behind it, McFarland and Ja Rule, wanted to not start a festival. They wanted to promote the app, which would allow you to book celebrities, basically like Uber. You push a button, say, hey, I want to book Vito Churko for my birthday. Okay, I want to book him for a podcast interview. I just push a button, and I go right to him. We set up a quote, and maybe we can set up this working relationship instead of all this, you know, all the people you got to go through to get to book someone. So they start this company, and they have this endeavor to start a music festival. And the way in which it goes down is that they want to make this the most lavish, the most special. And so they go out and they get all these influencers to promote it, okay? But in the end, it was a facade because the place that the influencers actually went to film this commercial wasn't the actual place. And the craziest scene, I think, I don't know if it's the one in the Netflix doc, but the craziest scene is New Year's Eve of 2017. they're partying, and they have this guy in the background going, dude, you guys need to start this. Like, you guys should have started a year ago. It would take probably 18 months to set up a real festival. They were partying on a boat on December 31st, 2016, knowing that there's a festival that's going to come and take place in April. And so in the end, the way that it shakes out is people are sold high-end experiences. They're sold big-time, like lavish tents and villas and things that are going to happen at this festival. So all the millennials that are into this kind of stuff, this exclusivity, the chance to party with models, were bamboozled. And when they actually get there, they see these tents. They see this ill-concocted, this fraud of a festival that takes place. And the other part that was fascinating to me was the reaction from people back in the States just clowning the millennials that went out there and just basically laughing at people that got stuck out there. Now, for me, I didn't laugh. I was, at the time, basically from afar paying attention to it. This put me right into it, paying attention to it really up close, and it was such a fascinating psychological profile, and it got my attention because of how social media can affect people. And us being influencers in the world of sports, you get a sense, wow, some of the stuff that we do, people go with, and they look at, and they when you're an influencer, people see what you're doing and they react to it. And to use it for that, I think, is way above what we're trying to do. We're just trying to spark up debate and trigger emotions. What he tried to do was defraud people of their money. And the reason why it's a fraud is he sold lavish experiences that he was not going to deliver on because, basically, for those that don't know, he basically ran an elaborate Ponzi scheme where he needed funds, so he just kept trying to sell stuff to get the funds so that he could pay off stuff. In the documentary, it showed that when people booked it, he said that it was going to be cashless, so you had to put money on a bracelet. So he was just trying to collect money as much as possible to pay off the festival. And so he eventually got caught. It was a terrible experience. And the part that was so fascinating to me was, now look, you probably view me as a guy that's got an ego and that has a direction, but I do listen. Eventually, I will listen to you.
Eventually, after 5, 6, 7, 10,
Yes.
12 times of telling you the same thing, you do get the message.
I do get the message, and I will go with it, like in terms of guests or ideas or things like that. I may not initially take on the idea, but if you were like, Doc, I think this is not good for the network. I think, you starting in a daily address. I think us going out to these events. I think us working with this company. Now, we would have a discussion, but what Billy McFarland did was basically, in essence, in that documentary, there were emails that were like, this is going to be a shit show. This is going to be awful. And yet the bravado of this man to think that he could take people from the States, fly them to an island for an experience, and promise them lavish things, and then expect them to sit in tents. And I was shocked that, at the day of the morning of the event, it rains. And they were like, some people were like just laughing, like, well, this was already a shit show. Now here it is more. And just like for me, I would definitely have been anxious, but to the point where I would have canceled it. I would have just said, look, I'm going to take a dive on it. Forget it. I'm going to pay everybody back. It's such a fascinating look at an ego so out of control that he really felt that he could con his way out of it at that level. And it's fascinating the way in which the influencers affected people. Now, for me, I'm not that affected by, Kendall Jenner and things like that. Obviously, I'm affected by sports influencers and the way they do things, but I would not have spent $10,000 to go to a festival because for me, I'm not a guy that's kind of wants to listen to music and I'm not into that festival scene. But those that are, I think that, events like Coachella out in California, they kind of got people's attention in terms of maybe making this like a $100 million a year entity. But to try and do it like that, the level of ego is even beyond me. And I'm a guy that you would assume has an ego. But to that degree where you don't listen, you don't consider others, and you are willing to really, prepare this festival in a way that is so god-awful, it was amazing. How did you take this? And when I said it to you, I'm like, Vito, obviously I'm going to play the clip that shocked everybody from the Netflix. The request from this event planner was crazy, but how'd you take this documentary? It was crazy to look at this thing.
Well, it's crazy how wrong he got it, to this Billy McFarland, and how big of a con man he was, and how much he bamboozled, as you use that term. I love that term, by the way, bamboozled. But he bamboozled all of these guests, people that had paid an outlandish amount of money, that he kept charging them more and more money too. And they had to come in cashless without their wallets and everything, no cards, nothing, no cash.
We recommend you put $300 a day.
Yeah.
We demand
almost. These wrists, right? These watches per se, or things that look like watches, everything was on there. And then what if the Wi-Fi didn't work? Like they talked about that aspect of it too. So there could have been that problem as well. But then it rained. It rained. They had these tents for this great experience that they advertised as this great experience for people to have like VIP access to the island and to be in there and being a part of all the festivities. Yet it rained on that day, the day in which everybody was arriving, the first day of the concert for this Fyre Festival. It rained and it poured and everything was drenched. The inside of these tents, the beds were drenched. And it was almost like the Fyre Festival, specifically Billy McFarland, got what he had coming for him.
And the part, like I said, was all the handlers were like, wait a minute, nobody's getting paid. The people that were advertised to be singing kind of, obviously, Blink-182 backed out the day of. It was a scenario in which people told them, like, this is a shit show. What's going on here? And the part that was really fascinating is the people that made the movie on Netflix were actually some of the people that promoted the Fyre Festival, so they had working knowledge of how things were. But it really goes to show you that you got to do your due diligence when you plan something. And let's say, for example, you're a customer and you put up that much money, $10,000. I want to see the villa. I want to see a picture. If I don't,
and they had no pictures. Remember that too. Nothing to display to these consumers that spent all of this money too.
And here's the other part: the powerful work of journalists. There were people that started Twitter accounts that said this is a fraud.
Yep.
And what had happened was the machine got so big that the power of influence. They threatened lawsuits against these people that were saying this is terrible. Even here's the other part that makes it really sick. Is that people have already landed on the island and the experience is going bad. They're tweeting back that this is terrible. Look, the guy that started the account that was called the Fyre Fraud, he said, look at what has happened. He got letters saying, if you continue to tweet this stuff, we're going to sue you. And they not only enacted a fraud beforehand, while it was going on, they kept this PR spin going on. And finally, the guy said, look, even though we got to cancel it, let's be honest for once. Let's be honest. And that's what you got to do is if this is going to go really bad, you can't fool people to think that, you know, especially when they expect luxury. Okay, you got to remember, too, that, yes, you got their money up front, but you got to deliver. Millennials aren't stupid. They want to pay for luxury, but they also want things delivered and that they'll complain faster. So that part of it, I think, was something fascinating in that Billy totally did not understand. He thought he could con his way out of not even delivering the goods. And it was so crazy. I just thought it was one of the craziest documentaries I've ever seen. It was wonderfully put together, and it really showed that, look, influencers can do some things, and what they got in trouble for was, that, like we do now on our Twitter page, you have to advertise that these people paid you to say these things. I can't just say, I love this company, on Twitter. You have to put hashtag ad or hashtag sponsored. You have to document that you're receiving some compensation to say these things so that you don't trick people. And Kendall Jenner got $250,000 for one message promoting this event.
Ridiculous.
And
how these models, so-called influencers, and they are influencers, but they paid all this money for just one tweet.
You have to be careful.
Extraordinary.
You have to be careful with that influence. You have to tell people what you're doing, and it was just fascinating. I want to play probably the wildest clip I think you're going to see this year. And when I saw it, like I said, it really goes to show you the notion of take one for the team. This guy was so entrenched with Billy. He was an event planner that worked with Billy, and he talked about something that happened in regards to trying to clear a bunch of water bottles from customs going into the Bahamas. It's the craziest thing you're ever going to hear, I think, this year. I don't think a clip on Netflix is going to top this. It was shocking to hear. I reposted it, and like I said, hashtag take one for the team.
Containers filled, 4 18-wheeler trucks filled with Evian water. But I had left the week before for 2 days to go to meetings in Bermuda for the America's Cup, and when I came back, I'd missed the big meeting with Customs, and of course Customs had said to Billy and the gang, you need to pay us $175,000 in cash today for us to release the water. I went down. Well, Billy called me. I'm going to speak completely, this won't go that far, I'm sure, but Billy called and said, Andy, we need you to take one big thing for the team. And I said, oh my gosh, I've been taking something for the team every day. He said, well, you're our wonderful gay leader, and we need you to go down. Will you suck Dick to fix this water problem. And
Fuck no, man. No, I'm out. No,
I said, Andy, if you will go down and suck Cunningham's dick, who's the head of customs, and get him to clear all of the containers with water, you will save this festival. And I literally drove home, took a shower. I drank some mouthwash. I'm like, oh my gosh, and I got into my car to drive across the island to take one for the team. And I got to his office fully prepared to suck his dick.
How about the loyalty there?
And he's like, Andy, listen, I will release all the water. I will let you serve it, but I want to be one of the first people to be paid this import fee for what you're doing. And I said, okay, great. And
sure,
I
we'll
got
pay
back,
you. Never happened.
And I had all the water that we needed. Can you imagine in my 30 years of a career that this is what I was going to do? I was going to do that, honestly, to save the festival.
That's fucking crazy.
Crazy.
Man. How do you
Even
ask
if
that?
I was gay or not, I wouldn't do that.
How do you
How
ask
about
that?
the loyalty there? Definition of loyalty. Loyal to a fault. Billy McFarland was defrauding all these people. He never paid all these people all the money that they were owed. He never paid all these people all that money.
And thank
Ridiculous.
goodness, one redeeming quality is people have started GoFundMes to give money back to the woman that was, one of the restaurant owners at the Bahamas that was saying that she had to pay these Bahamians $50,000 out of her own personal savings. I think she's gotten well over that. They started, I think, with a goal of maybe $100,000. They're already at, I think, $200,000. So it's just something where I think humanity does kick in. But I find it funny, though. What did you think of the social Darwinism aspect of it, where people in the States were dying laughing? You had scenes where people were like, if you had paid that much money to go see Blink 182, you deserve to kind of be in a tent that was water-soaked and, stuck in an island where you had no idea what was going on, eating cheese sandwiches. What'd you make of that?
Well, obviously, these people were way too easily duped and vulnerable. They were way too vulnerable because to be deceived to these measures and without seeing... Once again, you said it yourself. There are no pictures of villas, of the yachts, of these great VIP-esque experiences where you paid $10,000 at least, or north of $10,000. So Billy McFarland once again defrauded these people out of thousands and thousands of dollars for experiences that he falsely advertised without photos of these experiences, of these locales. And then they switched the island location on everybody. There was false advertising right then and there with the models when they appeared for the promo shoot. We're taking all these sexy pictures and videos to promote the Fyre Festival. Then the island was switched anyways, where the concert would have been for the Fyre Festival. So there is so much deception and false advertising, and it speaks volumes to the lack of character surrounding Billy McFarland and truly the con man that he is. And he was doing other illegal activities, defrauding others as well, leading up to this festival, after this festival. Remember that he was trying to get money out of people to reserve seats at New Year's Eve parties, at Beyonce concerts, at Coachella, I think even. So at different events and concerts. He was doing that as well, on top of what he did, defrauding people out of thousands of dollars with the Fyre Festival. So it was just a travesty to all these people that got duped. But obviously, it still is a little bit funny in retrospect to think that people really would spend all that money, on Blink 182? Really? You were that stupid to spend all that money, first and foremost, on Blink 182 as one of the headliners of the Fyre Festival?
Look,
come on, man.
I'm looking at it from this perspective. Once they promised that you were going to arrive via private jet, and then you're just on a regular plane with 747.
And everybody's jam-packed, too. Remember that? It wasn't comfortable for anybody.
I land, and I turn right back around and go, I've been defrauded right away, because once you're promised something and it doesn't happen, I don't think
that's just one thing, though.
Yeah,
you could have said right then and there, hey, I'm heading home, based off of that.
I'm starting to assume that, potentially speaking, this is all going to be a train wreck. I would not have assumed that it was going to be good, because that's the first step, is that, hey, you promised me a private jet. This isn't anywhere near what I had been promised. And I think that, first and foremost, I'm not spending $15,000 for 3 days on anything.
For, anything, and then any kind of music. I don't care how good the music festival is going to be. $15,000. And there are some good music festivals out there. Coachella, we already mentioned. Ultra Music Festival in Miami. I've been to that. I would never spend that kind of money on any of those festivals, Doc.
It was crazy. If you get a chance to watch the Hulu one, his level of narcissism is really shown in the Hulu feature. It's just unbelievable how this was all pulled off. And the fact that Ja Rule wasn't that crazy afterwards, the way he talks in the meeting? He's like, look, we're a bunch of effing smart people. We got to move this forward.
And we're all family. You guys are family.
Yeah,
you never looked out for each other.
Yeah, he cut him
and told
off.
everybody else, a part of the team, what was going on. Truly, not everybody knew, and they should have known what was going on leading up to that Fyre Festival, Doc.
Fascinating look all around. Highly recommended, the Fyre Festival documentary on Netflix. It is off the chains, and it was one where I was like, I'm glad you saw it because it was crazy. Let's take our first time out. We'll come back. I want to talk to you about the AFC and NFC title games. What's your reaction to the controversy? Do you think that certain sports need to change? Because obviously you being a baseball guy, the biggest talk is in regards to balls and strikes. And in the NFL, people are now talking about how penalties are called and overtime. So I just want to get your sense quickly as to how you're viewing sports, how they can be improved, and things like that, especially in the world of baseball and football. We'll talk about that as well as other things in regards to the world of Detroit sports and the Detroit Pistons. Stay with us. You're listening to Two Bad Hombres.
Doc, the Fyre Festival was crazy disappointing and crazy bad. Our fine sponsor at the DSP Network and of Two Bad Hombres and Legacy Football is Crazy Good. And Legacy Football, by the way, was founded in 2009. It is a premier off-season development program in the state of Michigan, in the Midwest, and in the entire U.S. of A. It provides unique platforms for student athletes on and off the football field through community service, social awareness, education, and football. And it consists of a staff of many former collegiate stars and NFL players, such as legendary Lions wideout Herman Moore and a former Michigan State All-American linebacker in Greg Jones, a past guest as well of the Two Bad Hombres podcast. Now, to all of you out there, to find out more about the Legacy Football organization, please contact National Director of Football Ops, Justin Cesante, or go online to legacyfootballorg.com.
Back here on Two Bad Hombres. Vito, I want to get your sense in regards to these two sports, okay? We all took in the AFC and NFC title games. A lot of people are continuing based on, obviously, the most egregious non-call in the history of sports, I think. People are definitely upset that the Saints did not get that penalty called on them, the pass interference. I mean, the LA defender basically took his helmet and rammed it into the receiver, and it was unfortunate that it didn't get called. Two basically non-calls. The one, the pass interference, and two, the helmet-to-helmet. And it's been called all year, so it's egregious. And you look at it on the AFC side, people are kind of chirping a little bit, upset that Patrick Mahomes didn't get a chance to have a rebuttal against Tom Brady, who once the game got to overtime, the Patriots called heads, and they won the coin toss in overtime, and they marched down the field, obviously playing against a very tired Kansas City defense, and obviously they went on now to earn a spot in the Super Bowl. Now, in terms of sports, we're always tweaking, we're always trying, here at the podcast, same thing, trying to add new content, new video delivery, different type of styles of delivering content, and that's fine. But in the world of sports, I do think in terms of tweaking and things like that, I don't want to see a situation in which every single play can be reviewed. Now, I know it's egregious, but there wasn't this outcry when the Detroit Lions got screwed. Now, in terms of calling pass interference, see, the thing that is concerning to a lot of people is sometimes, pass interference is a judgment call. There is a human element. I don't want to remove entirely the human element. And I know the opposite of that is, well, if you're going to use replay, you got to get it right. Okay, but there has to be a fine line. And they've in football, I think they've started to reach that, where you get two challenges and you're allowed to look at a couple different scenarios, but pass interference is not allowed. And I do think that there has to be some room for mistakes. I think that, you know what, the Saints got screwed. Everybody knows it. But guess what? In that same game, okay, they got screwed. They also had a chance to overcome. Okay, they got the ball in overtime, a la the Patriots. The Saints got the ball. And what did they do with it? Did they go down and score that touchdown and show some resiliency, come back from getting screwed? No. The offensive line failed to block the defenders of the LA Rams. Drew Brees had a bunch of pressure in his face. He threw an interception. And so, yes, singular plays can be focused on, and you can tweak football a little bit by maybe making all plays reviewable. But at the same time, I don't want games extended. I don't want the overtime rules changed too much. But I could understand, and I'm open to debate, if you're thinking that, you know what, maybe you make it so that you're allowed to challenge one pass interference throughout the game, and maybe we look at a tweak in terms of overtime where, you know what, it's first touchdown wins. and that's it. You know what? No field goals. You go for it on fourth down, no punting. The first touchdown wins, and that's how you win a game in the football. And in baseball, I'm open to the suggestion of you keep the umpires, you pay them, but they have basically no power in that, in terms of calling balls and strikes. You have a computerized system that calls it, but they're the delivery method of what happens, because you can get it accurately to the T with these advanced systems. You still have the umpire. He just gets a little earpiece in his ear. He hears, beep for a strike, nothing for a ball. He sees it, he calls it, and he's still the conduit, but he's not making the call. I'm open to that, but I'm not open to just unlimited challenges. Everything can be looked at. I'm happy with the human element. I'm happy discussing how the Saints got screwed. Welcome to the club. They now know what it's like to get screwed. So be it. That's part of life. You don't get to have everything that you want. Obviously, I'd like to be considered the best podcaster, the only podcaster, given all the credit for the work we've done. It doesn't happen.
Hey, keep hoping. Keep wishing for that. It's not going to come to fruition anytime soon.
Exactly. Nobody is writing that I've released a new podcast, that says, hey, there's a new Two Bad Hombres podcast that's been released, or nothing like that. We have to self-promote. Others, they get on the Drew Lane network and they get promoted. Oh, Denny McClain started a podcast. I'm like, okay, it's 2019. Everybody has a podcast. You don't even have to announce it. You should announce if somebody doesn't have a podcast. But give credit to those that maybe started those projects back in the
including
day.
You back in the day,
yeah,
2013, right?
Exactly.
2013.
It's almost 6 years, man.
Isn't
That's
that
a long
something?
time.
Time goes by really quick here.
What do you think of my diatribe on sports? Do you think they could be fine-tuned, baseball and football, or are you happy, similar to me, reveling in the pain of the Saints? Ha ha, pain.
Well, you know what? You don't always get what you want, right?
Yeah, right.
So we all want to keep trying to get what we want and always want to get what we want to be satisfied. But you're not always going to be fully satisfied in life. There are wins and losses in day-to-day life, right? And you have some L's. You just got to take an L some days. And unfortunately, the Saints had to take an L in the NFC Championship game, and the Chiefs had to take an L in the AFC title game. Now, the Chiefs, from their standpoint, they messed up big time because in regulation, D Ford for the Chiefs went off sides, lined up off sides. How big of a boneheaded move was that out of D Ford, a reliable defensive player all season long for the Kansas City Chiefs? And you line up off sides in the most crucial, pivotal game of your season in the AFC title game against the mighty, talented, mighty tough to beat, hugely vaunted New England Patriots. And you were the 1 seed at home in your home stadium, and you let that happen. You slip up like that. There was no crowd noise working against you. It was working against Tom Brady, Tom Terrific, and the New England Patriots. Yet you let yourself mentally slip up there in a crucial moment towards the end of the game in the fourth quarter of that AFC title game. And you line up off sides. You can't allow that to happen. That was a boneheaded move of epic proportions on the behalf of D Ford. And a lot of why the Chiefs lost, well, is predicated upon that. So I will harp upon D Ford making that mistake all day long for the rest of my life, actually. And it was a large reason, yes, why the Chiefs lost that game to the Pats. And first and foremost, it's a large reason why the game even had to go to overtime. And then you look at the PI and the helmet-to-helmet hit and the Saints-Rams NFC title game. Yeah, clearly the refs messed up because they didn't call anything there when they should have called something. But guess what? When Nickel Roby Coleman hit the Saints receiver, who was defenseless there, well, the Saints receiver didn't get up and act like there was a penalty that should have been called. He didn't make a big scene about it either. Now, the refs should have further discussed it, and you will hope they could review those plays. But you can't review a potential pass interference play. You can't go back and look at it. That's just the NFL rule book. So there's always going to be that human error. And I'm fine with that because as humans, we make errors in our day-to-day lives. These players do on the football field. So, and other people, other than athletes, make mistakes in their day-to-day lives and day-to-day careers and whatever industry they may be in. So it's a part of day-to-day life as human beings. And I think it's totally fine that that is the case and that you will never erase that completely from any of these professional sports leagues, Doc.
I agree. What do you think about baseball in terms of potentially using automated systems to call balls and strikes?
Well, I think the umpires would really argue about that and would let the MLB Players Association, just Major League Baseball and the commissioner, they would let their voices be heard. And there'd be a lot of complaining about that being instituted. Now, would it lead to more effective balls and strikes being called and more consistently right balls and strikes being called on a game-to-game basis? Yes, and it is a long season, so you want to see that happen as much as possible over the course of 162 games. But will you ever get it totally right, even with a robotic machine put in there to call the balls and strikes? Maybe not, and it's because of the fact, what if there's a robotic flaw? A flaw in the machinery and in the mechanics of that robot calling the balls and strikes in a given day. And what happens then? Well, it leads to some balls being called strikes, some strikes being called balls then. So all of a sudden, you're back in the same department as you were before with the same issue at hand of the umpire sometimes erroneously calling the balls and strikes. So there's going to be error in their judgment. And there is. We've seen it. And maybe there has been too many errors at times in the balls and strikes called. But I think to eliminate them completely, it would lead to a lot of complaining from these umpires to the Players Union, to Commissioner Manfred, Rob Manfred, the Commissioner of Major League Baseball. All of them would have to hear about all of that from the umpires for a long, long time. And it would lead to grievances, maybe a lawsuit. And does Major League Baseball really want to get that dirty with the umps and have to deal with that potential lawsuit on their hands? I'm going to say no, and that's why I think umpires will never go completely by the wayside in Major League Baseball, Doc.
So you and I are in agreement. Sometimes change for the sake of change is not always for the best. And they have to take a look at how much are they going to change with the use of technology. It's going to be ongoing, but I do think this one was so egregious, something is going to be put in place. Now, Vito, did you get a chance to see what happened after the Detroit Pistons played the Memphis Grizzlies?
I don't know. Tell me, what happened?
Okay, so what happened was the Detroit Pistons played a tough game on the road, but they won, okay? And Blake Griffin's interviewed on Fox Sports Detroit.
And Reggie Jackson came into the picture, right?
Exactly, and it's bad timing because obviously Reggie doesn't know what's being talked about, but Blake Griffin is so frustrated. He's like, we got to play better down the stretch. We have to perform better. We have to try and not let the same crap happen over and over again. And at the same time, you got Reggie flaunting his posing and things like that. And SportsCenter picked it up. The national media picked it up. Barstool Sports talked about. It's probably one of the worst photo bombs in the history. And it kind of goes to show you right now where it stands with the Pistons. A lot of talk is negative. And you have the tanking crowd versus the anti-tanking crowd. But look, I just threw out just quickly now on our Twitter page at Detroit Podcast, I threw out a question regarding the Pistons, right? 4 responses already back. We don't care. Apathy. The Pistons suck.
People don't care anymore. It's sad but true about the Pistons.
Worst attendance in the entire NBA. And I'll say this, working with the Pistons is okay, but not the best in terms of public relations, and I'm willing to say it. Challenging, to say the least. It's been easier with others, for sure. And so I can see why the Pistons are struggling in that. Not great media relations, not great talent. The fans aren't buying in. Basically, you have Blake Griffin, and everybody wants to throw everybody else out. People are commenting on Andre Drummond's effort. They're commenting on Reggie Jackson. They feel like they can't win. And so right now, you have Blake Griffin, who's obviously showing frustration. You got Reggie Jackson clowning around. There's that aspect of it. I want to get your sense of that. And 2, the Pistons are delusional. The organization right now, there's talk and rumors, and you've heard it too, that maybe they're willing to trade their first-round pick to acquire talent this year just to get to the 7th seed. The height of ridiculousness is going on right now, and many people are starting to go, wait a minute, is Tom Gores the worst owner in the NBA outside of James Dolan? Is it Tom Gores then? And I think people are starting to maybe accept the possibility, wow, Tom Gores delayed the rebuild by getting Blake Griffin. Tom Gores is causing a problem because he just wants to get to the postseason, whereas the entire fan base now has waited a decade, has seen awful basketball for a long time. And the fans are like, look, we don't want to get to the playoffs. Build a team. Rebuild like the Red Wings. There's a plan. And finally, it took long enough. The Tigers are now going to be in year 2 or 3 of a massive rebuild. The Pistons are still acting in a way that's like 15 years old. It's 2019, and the strategy should be, and I do agree with those that say tank, with the notion of acquire talent in the draft. And I know those that are anti-tank are definitely looking at Donovan Mitchell going, look, how can we trust any organization to pick top players in the top 5 when you got the Lions who butcher picks and you got the Pistons who obviously now have 2 picks that are god-awful and multiple ones. They got probably 2 of the worst draft picks in the history of the NBA with Darko and now Luke Kennard. unfortunately. Donovan Mitchell's dropping dimes, and everybody's jealous. I think the Pistons are in a really tough spot right now in terms of press and in terms of people caring. And then you got this aesthetic where you got national media calling the Pistons a clown show. And unfortunately, I hate to say it with the team that I support and love. I like basketball. It's no small feat. It's not a coincidence that I started covering college basketball. I like hoops. It's fun. It's easy to cover. It's easier to understand the game in terms of how things work, in terms of passing and defense and offense. It's relatable to a fan. What the Pistons are doing is unrelatable on the biggest scale possible. I think it's a franchise that's spiraling out of control. If they trade that first-round pick, Vito, I'm thinking another decade of futility.
And the fans have already checked out. They're already done with this franchise. They gave up a long time ago. Nobody's showing up to Little Caesars Arena to watch this product, this current state of the Pistons, that are 5 games under 500 in a rut with no direction. Seemingly no ability to get out of this rut unless you deal maybe even Blake Griffin. But to start off, Reggie Jackson and Andre Drummond, and pretty much everybody else should be made available, including Blake Griffin, for the right offer. Now, you don't just deal them for the heck of it. But I say with Reggie Jackson and Andre Drummond at this point, Doc, you deal them for whatever you can get. You deal them for a bag of balls. You deal them for completely nothing. Straight up nothing. Straight up garbage is what I'd be fine with the Pistons doing and dealing Andre Drummond and Reggie Jackson for. Blake Griffin, they better get a nice return in return for his services, because Blake Griffin is having a statistically career-best season for himself. Now, he's putting up a lot of shots, but he has to have the ball in his hands and make plays and be the creator for this team because it's so lackluster and has no other options to score the basketball consistently from game to game. I mean, who are the shooters and scorers on this team? Outside of Luke Kennard here and there, who has lost a ton of confidence, in my opinion, has been a semi-bust. Now, not one of the worst busts in Pistons history, as you said, Doc. I think you were a little bit outlandish with that sentiment being expressed towards Luke Kennard. He's not that bad, at least as of yet. But Darko definitely is one of the worst draft picks in Pistons history. But anyways, back to my point that I was trying to make about Luke Kennard. He can shoot from long distance here and there, but his confidence isn't nearly where it was, I think, when he was drafted in the first round by the Pistons. And perhaps, yes, erroneously so in the first round by the Pistons, in a spot where they could have had Donovan Mitchell of the Utah Jazz. But outside of him, there's Reggie Bullock, and I like him a lot. Bullock can score, and from long distance he can stretch it and score. So Reggie Bullock is, I think, a good, reliable guy for the Pistons that, yes, can knock down the three, at least semi-consistently. And he has some games where he's going to score north of 20 points because of making enough three-pointers. And then there's Blake. It's really, though, game to game, Blake, a lot of Blake, too much of Blake, and then a little bit of Reggie Bullock mixed in there here and there. And that's not enough to be a winning product. That's not the formula for a consistent winning product. You're going to be a team that barely contends for an 8th spot in the Eastern Conference, of all things, with that kind of formula for success. Because it's not very successful. Once again, it's not a winning formula that, well, you can win with game to game and season to season with. This team is deeply flawed. And if owner Tom Gores trades his first rounder and more to attain Mike Conley, let's say, of the Memphis Grizzlies, a broken-down Mike Conley, who is no longer elite, if he was ever even an elite point guard, well, it'd be the biggest travesty almost in Pistons history, almost a bigger travesty and more of a boneheaded decision than the Pistons taking Darko Milicic in the first round instead of Carmelo Anthony and other guys that became all-stars and superstar players in the NBA, Doc.
Yeah, it's tough, man. I think right now, just looking Twitter right now, Al Avila's telling the fans that he can't spend until 2021.
Really? That's the latest on the Tigers front. And that's hugely disappointing as a Tigers fan. What do we have to root for with these Tigers? With these Pistons, as we already spoke about. The Pistons, lackluster product. The Tigers, even more lackluster, you could say, but at least they have some sort of a direction. They're rebuilding, trying to get better for the long-term future. What are the Pistons trying to get good for? They're not good right now, so they can't win, as right now they're stuck in this so-called win-now mode when they can't even win enough to make the playoffs, perhaps. They're outside of the playoff picture right now. They're not even the 8th seed in the Eastern Conference at 21-26 currently, Doc. Is that a recipe for success? That's a recipe for disaster and for staying out of the playoffs. So they have no direction whatsoever, and that's what makes it even more disappointing as a Pistons fan to watch this current state of the Pistons franchise that is not going anywhere in the near future.
Yeah, man. Crazy stuff with the Pistons right now. They got a long way to go. The fans, and like Perry Farrell said it, you had the Palace, you owned it. You're viewed as a tenant. What's that say? I think the fan base obviously was out there primarily in Oakland County, and obviously the fans in Detroit aren't going to, right now currently support a losing product. But I'll just agree with you. I think the Luke Kennard draft pick, obviously it's terrible.
Well, you said it's one of the biggest draft busts in Piston history.
I think that combined
come on, there's been other bad draft picks.
Not the worst.
Martin Cleaves rings a bell. Come on. Rings a bell for me. Does it ring a bell for you? He'd be up there as one of the worst draft picks in Pistons history. Would have to be.
Touche, Rodney White.
I was going to say Rodney White, yes. I thought of him right away, too.
I have his bobblehead.
Yeah, so that was a bad draft pick. At least Kennard. Now, he wasn't worth that draft pick for the Pistons, but he can shoot from long distance. I think when he gets head on his shoulders and regains that confidence, which, he's young enough to regain it, and hopefully he does. Well, if he does, Doc, he can drain some three-pointers. And the current state of the NBA and of basketball is all about draining three-pointers on a consistent game-to-game basis. Luke Kennard, at least, can do that, Doc.
There's no way they trade the first-round pick, right? They can't do that. No.
If they do, I saw Shamik Mohile, who we've had on, said he would eat his tweet about the Pistons trading a first-rounder. If they do, he's going to eat his tweet about that because it's like so unforeseeable. It would be so ludicrous for the Pistons franchise to make that decision right now when they're under 500 and outside of the playoffs currently, Doc.
So what we'll do now is we'll table a discussion about Starbucks because now you can order Starbucks. We are getting to that point, Vito. It's 2019. We are getting closer to an on-demand world where everything can be delivered at a push of a button. It's crazy. I saw that article, and I'm like, holy cow. Is there anything really that we want that we can't have? It's getting to that point. I want to save that for next week. Great podcast recording. You can follow Vito on Twitter at Vito Jerome. Follow the show at 2 Bad Hombres. I appreciate everybody that downloads shows on the network. I hope everybody has a great weekend. I can't wait to talk to everybody next week, previewing the Super Bowl and what we're both going to be doing. Vito, I made a big purchase, over $1,000. I'll tell you what it is next week.
You?
I
really,
did.
Doc?
Not all up front. Obviously, I financed it.
In installments.
For the next 2 years. So I'll tell everybody what that is next week on the next edition of 2 Bad Hombres.
And we're going to continue to work hard, and be not tired, right? Never be tired here on 2 Bad Hombres. We're not trying to become lazy like the rest of society, perhaps, with everything being delivered. And anyways, with that, Doc, I'm out. Adios, guys.